Hey guys, and welcome to Chapter 15. We're going to talk about primarily unemployment, but first, let's just give a brief explanation where the unemployment statistics come from. So all labor force statistics come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, also known as the BLS. It's in the United States Department of Labor. They do a monthly survey of 60,000 households, and it's based on the questions that are answered by the adult population. That's 16 years or older. And so every month they answer a series of questions about their labor force participation, their jobs, etc. And from these we get the unemployment rate. Now, the BLS divides the population into three groups: the employed, who are paid employees, self-employed, or even unpaid workers in a family business; the unemployed, people who are not working, but importantly, they have looked for work during the previous 4 weeks, so they want to work. And then there's the people who are not in the labor force. This is everybody else who are not looking for work and don't have a job. Think retirees or students, etc. Okay, the labor force is the total number of workers, including the employed and the unemployed. So basically, if you add together the unemployed and employed, you'll get to the total labor force. And the formulas that they use to calculate these rates is as follows. So the unemployment rate is the percent of the labor force that is unemployed. Basically, you look at the number of unemployed people divided by the total number in the labor force. Right? You're not looking at the number of unemployed people over the entire population. It's only over the number of people that want to work. The good way to think of the labor force is the total number of people who either have a job or want to have a job. Now, the labor force participation rate is another rate. It's basically the percent of people who want to have a job over the total number of people in the adult population. So remember, I said that this is the total number of people who either have a job or want to have a job divided by the total adult population. So these are two really important formulas. Make sure that you have them down. I'm going to go ahead and have you calculate the following labor force statistics. I just pulled these numbers off the Bureau of Labor Statistics just a couple of days ago, so they're the most updated that we have access to right now. As you can see, the number of employed is 146 million. The number of unemployed is right here, 9.3 million, and then the people who are not in labor force is 92.6 million people in America. So go ahead and calculate the total number of the people in the labor force, the unemployment rate, the total number of people in the adult population, and the labor force participation rate using this data. Click pause, and then when you're done, go ahead and come back. Alright, so the labor force is just the employed plus unemployed. Like I told you earlier, it's 155.9. The unemployment rate is a very low 5.9%, right? I just take the total number of people who don't have a job divided by the total number of people who either are working or want to have a job, and I get 5.9%. That's the lowest it's been in a number of years. The total population now is the people who are in the labor force and the people who are not in the labor force. I just add those together, 248.5. This is not the total population of the United States. The total population of the United States is about 316 million people, because the difference between those two numbers are the children who are under 16. Finally, the labor force participation rate. This is 62.7%. It tells me out of all of the adults that are currently in the United States, how many of them are either working or trying to get a job, right? The other people, the other, what's that, 36.3% or something like that, 37.3% are perhaps retirees or in prisons or some other reason can't work. Okay, so let's break these out by group because the BLS publishes them out per demographic group, and they reveal widely different labor market experiences for these different groups. As you can see, white males have an unemployment rate of about 6.1% and a labor force participation rate of 72%, compared to black males are much more unemployed and they have a lower labor force participation rate. The difference between these two is very striking because this is a kind of clear indication of different labor market conditions that have to do with race. As we can also see, the white females have a lower unemployment rate than the black females. In general, females have a lower labor force participation rate than the male of the same group, probably because the females tend to more often stay home and watch the children. Let's look at teens. So teens are from 16 to 19 years old. The unemployment rate for teens is again much higher than for white teens, while the labor force participation rate is much lower. Notice that for both of these groups, the labor force participation rate is fairly low because most teens from 16 to 19 years old are going to high school or some sort of school. Okay, let's look over for all ages. That's ages 16 and up. The unemployment rate for Asians is well below the average. Okay, the unemployment rates for Hispanics is well above the average. They both have nearly identical labor force participation rates. So that again is shows us evidence of some sort of differential access to jobs. And finally, breaking it out by education, as you see, as the education increases, the unemployment rate is decreasing. That's to be expected, right? The more in education you get, the more likely you are to have a job. The labor force participation rate also climbs as employment climbs, which is to be expected. Most people get education so that they can be a part of the labor force. Now, labor force participation rates broken out by sex. You see females have been having an increasing trend over time. Males have been having a decreasing trend. Maybe this is because the males have been decreasing, perhaps because more females are working, so fewer males need to be working. I want you to go ahead and talk about some problems that the unemployment rate has. All right, and I want you to kind of figure them out by yourselves. What happens to the unemployment rate if Sue loses her job and begins looking for a new one? What happens if John, a steel worker who's been out of work for an entire year, gives up? And then C, what happens if Sam loses his job and then gets a job at McDonald's? What I want you to do is figure out in each case what happens to the unemployment rate, and then tell me if that's really a good representation of what's going on in our society. Click pause, and then when you're done, go ahead and come back. Alright, so if Sue loses her job and begins looking for a new one, you see the unemployment rate rises, right? There's one additional unemployed worker, the labor force is the same size, and so the unemployment rate goes up. And this is good because really Sue losing her job is telling me that the labor market conditions are worsening, and so the unemployment rate is helpful in this case. Let's think about John though. He's used to be unemployed, but then he stops looking for work, meaning he drops out of the labor force altogether. Well, these guys, these discouraged workers, they'd like to work, but they've given up looking for jobs, so they are not in the labor force instead of being unemployed. So this is tricky because what actually ends up happening is the unemployment rate falls because John is no longer counted as unemployed. So it seems like there's fewer unemployed people, but this is not true. If you were just to look at the unemployment rate, it would be falling. You'd think, oh, the economy's doing better, but that's not true. The economy is so bad that John gave up looking. So in this instance, the unemployment rate is actually not helpful. It's not telling us the right thing. Okay. Finally, Sam loses his $80,000 job, takes a part-time one at McDonald's until he finds a better one. The unemployment rate's not going to change because he had a job and now he still has a job, right? He's still employed. But things are very much worse and the unemployment rate is failing to show it, right? He used to have an $80,000 job and now he's flipping burgers. This is much worse, but the unemployment rate doesn't pick that up. All right, so what does the employment rate really measure? Well, it's not a perfect indicator, but because it excludes discouraged workers, it does not distinguish between full and part-time work, and finally, some people actually lie to the BLS interviewers because for some reason they think that it's going to help them get unemployment benefits or something like that. However, the unemployment rate is really still one of our main, if not the main, indicator of how well the economy is doing as a whole. So let's talk about the duration of unemployment because most people are not unemployed for that long. So historically, 1/3 of the unemployed have been unemployed under 5 weeks. If you add up all the people who've been unemployed under 14 weeks, that's 2/3 of all the people who are unemployed. And then there's 20% of people who have been unemployed for over 6 months. However, it's these 20% of people that keep showing up over and over again, right? When they do their interviews over and over again, the people who are they're most likely to pick up being unemployed are these long-term unemployed. The people who are only unemployed for a short period of time, it's not likely that they will have gotten interviewed while they were unemployed. So even though they make up a small amount of the total people who are unemployed, they make up a lot of the unemployed people who get interviewed. All right, so it accounts for most of the unemployment observed over time because it has very little turnover. So knowing that this is the case can help policymakers design better policies to help the unemployed. Just not very long ago, maybe perhaps 2 years ago, unemployment insurance benefits were extended to extend for more than 6 months, just to help those people who have been unemployed for more than 6 months. Let's talk about the 3 forms of unemployment. So the key here is to realize that there's always some unemployment in our society. It's impossible to get rid of it altogether. We call this the natural rate of unemployment. It's the normal rate of unemployment around which the actual employment rate fluctuates. So there always is going to be unemployment. We call it the natural rate of unemployment. When the unemployment rate is either higher or lower than that, we call this cyclical unemployment. The easy way to think about this is the departure or the deviation of the actual unemployment number from the natural rate. Okay? And this is caused by business cycles. So basically, as the economy gets better, unemployment drops. As the economy gets worse, unemployment goes back up. So unemployment goes up and down. It's just associated with the economy going up and down as a whole. We call those business cycles. Okay, so type number 1 of unemployment is this right here, cyclical unemployment. That's type number 1. Natural rate of unemployment is not a type of unemployment. This is just kind of the idea that unemployment always occurs. So the first one is cyclical unemployment. All right, and if you look at the full unemployment, the actual unemployment numbers that are reported by the BLS, you can see they go up and down. The Congressional Budget Office has calculated the natural rate of unemployment, which is like the rate that will always kind of be there. You can see that when, for example, here the unemployment rate is a lot higher than the natural rate of unemployment, that corresponds to a period of a recession. Here recently we've had a recession and the unemployment rate has been much higher than the natural rate of unemployment. So now let's get to the other part of unemployment. So there's the cyclical, the part that goes up and down caused by business cycles, and then there's this natural rate. And so there's always some unemployment. It's broken into 2 pieces. Frictional unemployment, this comes from job search. People get unemployed. It takes a couple of days or weeks or months to find the new job. This kind of unemployment, you can't get rid of it because people are always changing jobs, getting laid off and getting new ones, and takes them time to find a new job. This unemployment is unavoidable. It's short-term, however, for most workers. There's also this other kind of employment known as structural employment. Basically, the summary of this is the wages are too high. That makes fewer jobs than workers, and it does usually occur longer term. So this right here is type of employment number 2, and this is type number 3. Now number 2 and 3 combine, to create the natural rate. So these come together to create the natural rate of unemployment. The other one, cyclical unemployment, that just makes the level of unemployment fluctuate around the natural rate of unemployment. Let's talk a bit more about frictional unemployment right now. So remember, it has to do with searching for jobs, right? Workers are different and jobs are different. Therefore, there's this idea of job search is the process of matching workers with their appropriate jobs. This especially becomes noticeable when we have what are called sectoral shifts. In other words, our consumers on our economy demand different things. For example, back a number of years ago, people used to read newspapers, right, with texts on it, and they would get their news from the newspaper. Then a couple of years later, they started getting their news from the television, right? There's some antennas on the television. And nowadays, everybody gets their news from the internet, all right? This is an example of a sectoral shift. People who are unemployed over here in the newspaper world became unemployed when we switched to TV and then when we switched to the internet. When sectoral shifts occur, these people over here who became unemployed have to search for a new job. They're unemployed during this time. That is called frictional unemployment. Okay, so these shifts in sectors displace some workers. They must search for their new jobs. Okay, so this frictional unemployment is inevitable. It cannot be gotten rid of because the economy is always changing. What can the government do? That ultimately is what public policy means. Well, first, government employment agencies provide information about job vacancies. They try to help match the job lists with the people with the jobs. Public training programs also aim to help particularly these people in declining industries that have experienced sectoral shift. People who are working in dying industries like the newspaper people, they have to get retrained so that they can get a new job in the new industries. Unemployment insurance. Now, this is a program that protects workers' incomes when they become unemployed. It actually increases frictional employment. Why? Well, it makes people okay with taking longer during their job search. Remember, frictional unemployment has to do with the job search. People respond to incentives. In other words, I have to give up my unemployment benefits when I get a job, so sometimes it takes me longer to find a job, and I go slower during my job search because I kind of like that portion of time. So it actually makes frictional unemployment worse. Now, unemployment insurance does have a good side, though. It reduces uncertainty over incomes. Don't forget from last chapter, people hate risk, so unemployment insurance reduces risk. It also gives the unemployed people more time to search, which might be a good thing because they're able to find the job that they're really qualified for. They're going to be more productive, and society is going to be better off because they have their better job. All right, let's go to the third type of unemployment, structural unemployment. This is the second thing that influences the natural rate. Remember, the two things that influence the natural rate are frictional and structural. Let's think about structural. So if I draw the job market, right, this is an interesting marketplace. Perhaps you've never seen it before. The quantity of laborers is over here. The price of the laborers is up here. What's price of a laborer? It's their wage. Let me go ahead and draw a supply and demand. So the demanders are the firms, the people who want labor. The suppliers are the people, the households, the people who supply labor. When we have an equilibrium wage, we know that the quantity supply and quantity demand is in the same number, so they're in balance. But however, when there's not enough jobs to go around, that's the definition of structural employment, the only way this can happen is when the wage is too high. Notice if the wage is here at W1, the orange line, notice the number of people who want to work is here, the number of people who actually have jobs is here. The distance between the two of these we call unemployment. All right, now why on earth would the wages be too high? Let me give you 3 reasons. 1, minimum wage laws. It's keeping the wage up too high. However, very few people are actually affected by the minimum wage, so this is probably not the main reason. Another reason, unions, right? A union is a workers' association that bargains collectively with their employers. They exert their market power, they have bargaining power to try to get higher wages, and it's true. On average, the typical union worker earns 20% more than the exact same person working without a union. All right. So when unions raise the wages above the equilibrium, this unemployment can happen. Now, why would they do that? Well, the people inside the union are better off because they get paid more. But then all of those people who are outside of the union are the people who are unemployed, not the people inside the union. It's people outside. So the people outside of the union are unemployed. They go to non-unionized labor markets, and that further reduces the wages in those markets. So really there's negative effects in many other markets also from the union. Okay, so are unions good or bad? Economists disagree. Some people say unions are cartels, which are just groups of people who get together and change prices. Other people say that it reduces the big firms' ability to take advantage of workers. So it makes the firms more responsive to the workers. So really, the verdict is still out there. Are they good or bad? It's unknown. Okay, the third reason why the price of a worker, i.e. the wages, might be too high is this idea of efficiency wages, right? And the key here is that the firms naturally, all by themselves, volunteer to pay their workers, quote, too much. Why would the firms pay their workers too much? Well, there's different reasons. Let's look at some of them. The first is worker health. This is not really common in America, but like, for example, in, I don't know, India, if you pay your workers more than what you should have to pay them, if the equilibrium wage is too low and they're starving, then you're not going to have as good workers as you could. So if you pay them a little more than you need to, then you're going to allow them to eat better and you're going to make them more healthy. Worker turnover. If you pay your workers more than you need to, more than everybody else is paying, then people are going to try to stay working with you, and you won't have to worry about hiring and training new workers so often. Worker quality, same thing. If you offer higher quality wages to everybody, or excuse me, if you offer higher wages to everyone, you're going to attract better quality. And finally, worker effort. People are going to work harder because if they get fired for shirking, the job that they're going to go to is a lower paying job. So people end up working much better. There's an example about Henry Ford in your textbook. He paid people much higher than the market rate wage, and he had tremendous success. Okay. All right, so let me ask you this. Which of the following would most likely reduce frictional unemployment? The government eliminates the minimum wage. The government increases unemployment insurance. A new law bans labor unions. More workers and employers start using LinkedIn, and sectoral shifts become more frequent. Why don't you go through and figure out actually each of these letters, which one of the three types of unemployment it changes. Remember, the three types are cyclical, frictional, and frictional, cyclical, structural unemployment. And why don't you go ahead and figure out which one changes which type of unemployment. All right. So A and C actually are going to reduce structural employment, not frictional unemployment, because if the government eliminates minimum wages or the government has a new law that bans labor unions, the wages will fall and frictional unemployment will reduce. Not frictional though. Okay, B and E, increasing unemployment insurance or sectoral shifts become more frequent. These are actually going to increase frictional employment. They won't reduce it. So that leaves D, that's going to reduce frictional unemployment. Basically, it's making the job search process easier. Everybody's already at LinkedIn. It's going to make it easier. All right, so basically, in conclusion, the natural rate of unemployment consists of these two types: frictional unemployment, which basically comes about because it takes time to search for the right jobs. It will always be there. And also, the other thing that creates natural rate of unemployment is structural unemployment. That's when the wage is too high. It creates a surplus of laborers, and it's due to minimum wages, labor unions, and this idea of efficiency wages. Okay, in later chapters, we'll talk more about the cyclical unemployment. All right, that was the first type of unemployment, which is just driven by the business cycle, when the business cycle goes up and down.